Okay, so you ready to really dive deep today?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always ready for a good philosophical deep dive, especially when it comes to thinkers who, deserve so much more attention than they've gotten.
That's exactly what we're doing today. Think about all the big names in philosophy, right? The ones you always hear about.
Yeah.
But there are so many incredible thinkers whose work has been kind of pushed to the sidelines.
Yeah, it's like a whole hidden history of philosophy waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. And today we are going to unearth the brilliance of Anna Julia Cooper.
Ah,
Yeah.
Anna Julia Cooper. Now, there's a name that should be on everyone's lips.
Mm-hmm.
She was a force. A leading African-American intellectual, an educator, an activist, active from the late 19th century all the way into the mid-20th century.
And what really makes her stand out philosophically is that she wrote one of the very first book-length analyses specifically focusing on the unique situation of Black women in the U.S. No one was doing that at the time.
That's right. Her work was truly groundbreaking, and it laid the foundation for so much of what we understand about race, gender, and oppression today.
So while we'll definitely touch on her amazing life story and her work as an educator and activist, we're really here to dig into the philosophy.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to get philosophical.
Perfect. Because Cooper's work it's like a gold mine of philosophical insights. Her ideas about the interconnectedness of race and gender, the role of class and labor, the importance of education and intellectual development, her theories of democracy and citizenship, it's all there.
All incredibly relevant topics even today.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we starting with all of this?
Well, we're going to be using mainly the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on Anna Julia Cooper as our guide. It's a really comprehensive overview of her major writings.
Including, I'm assuming, her most famous work, A Voice from the South.
Absolutely. Plus her doctoral dissertation, which is it's a fascinating piece of work. It's titled L'attitude de la France à l'égard de l'esclavage pendant la Révolution. And of course, we'll look at some of her other key essays.
That Stanford Encyclopedia entry also gives a lot of context, right?
Yeah.
About the reception of her ideas both when she was alive and today.
Yes, exactly. It also includes a little biographical sketch, which is, always helpful to understand where a thinker is coming from.
Absolutely. Context is key. So for you as a philosopher, what makes Cooper's work so essential? Why do you think she's worth spending our time on today?
Oh, wow. That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, Cooper's thought, it touches on so many crucial areas of philosophy, like feminist philosophy, of course, but also standpoint theory, epistemology, critical philosophy of race, African-American philosophy, even political philosophy.
Wow, she really covered a lot of ground. So let's start digging into that ground. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think we should start with A Voice from the South. It's her most influential work, and it really sets the stage for a lot of her later thinking.
Okay, sounds good. So Voice from the South, published in 1892, that's pretty significant, isn't it? Think about it, less than 30 years after the 13th Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, the country was still grappling with the legacy of slavery. Reconstruction was in full swing. And, the philosophical and social landscape, it was a time of immense change.
And into that landscape steps Anna Julia Cooper with his powerful voice.
Right. I mean, when we think about the big names writing about race and freedom in the late 19th century, we tend to think of Douglas Truth Washington Du Bois.
Yeah, those are the names that usually come to mind.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is that Cooper's voice actually comes before a lot of their most famous works. It's like she's laying the groundwork for these future conversations.
She's setting the stage.
Yeah.
And what's the central message of this voice? What's she trying to tell the world?
The core argument of voice is it's really about the absolute necessity of women's voices, particularly the voices of Black women being heard. She argues that their unique lived experience is shaped by what she calls the racialization of gender and the sexualization of race, give them a perspective that's essential for understanding society.
So she's saying that because of their specific experiences, Black women have a particular kind of knowledge.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, philosophically speaking. Decades before the term intersectionality even existed, Coopers are already laying out a clear analysis of how different forms of oppression intersect and compound each other.
She's showing how these systems of oppression, like racism and sexism, they don't exist in isolation. They interact and impact people in really complex ways.
Yes. And she's specifically highlighting how Black women are impacted by both racism and sexism, but are often left out of the conversations about either one.
That's a really important point, and it's something that sadly still happens today. But Cooper was way ahead of her time in recognizing this.
Absolutely. And because of this unique social positioning, Cooper argues that Black women have a a distinct epistemological standpoint.
So they have a different way of knowing the world based on their experiences.
Precisely. They have a particular vantage point for which to observe and analyze society and its oppressive structures. And that leads them to really valuable ethical insights that other people might miss.
I feel like she's saying that where you stand in society, your social location shapes what you can know and how you know it.
Exactly. It's a really powerful early articulation of situated knowledge, which is, it's a central concept in so many areas of contemporary philosophy.
Definitely. And it's clear that even way back then, Cooper understood the importance of considering these different standpoints.
Oh, absolutely. And beyond this crucial insight into epistemology, Voice also explores a whole range of other key philosophical themes.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, she emphasizes the importance of education and intellectual development for everyone, the value of recognizing and respecting difference, and the unique contributions that each racial group brings to the overall progress of humanity.
So she's not just talking about Black women's experiences. She's also thinking about the bigger picture, the whole of human progress.
Exactly. She sees all these different perspectives as essential pieces of the puzzle. And then she also develops what scholars have identified as a materialist and existential conceptualization of worth.
So instead of relying on the racial hierarchies of the time, she's grounding human value in something more tangible.
Exactly. She's focusing on people's tangible contributions and their efforts at self-development as the real measure of their worth.
It's like she's saying it doesn't matter what race you are, it's what you do, how you contribute that truly matters.
Precisely. And her work even touches on a theory of truth that's really grounded in these unique standpoints and lived experiences.
Wow. So she's really connecting all these different philosophical threads together.
Yeah, she's weaving this incredibly intricate tapestry of ideas.
Right.
And it's not just us looking back and recognizing her significance.
They're saying her work was influential even back then.
Yes. The Stanford entry points out that even W.E.B. Du Bois, in his book Darkwater, directly quotes Cooper's work. Though, as the entry notes, he doesn't give her full attribution.
Oof. That's not cool. But it does at least show that her ideas were circulating. They were having an impact.
Absolutely. It suggests that her ideas were influencing other thinkers, even if her contributions weren't always fully acknowledged at the time.
Which, sadly, was a common experience for a lot of Black women intellectuals in that era.
It's a real injustice. But let's move on to Cooper's doctoral thesis, because that's another fascinating piece of her philosophical puzzle.
Tell us more about this thesis.
So it's titled L'attitude de la France à l'égard de l'esclavage pendant la Révolution. And earning her PhD from the Sorbonne in 1925, that was a huge accomplishment.
It was, especially at that time. Remember, she was only the fourth African-American woman in the U.S. to do so.
That's right. And get this, it happened in the same year that Alain Locke published The New Negro.
Wow. Talk about a pivotal moment in history. She was right there in the heart of the Harlem Renaissance.
Mm-hmm. She was. And the subject of her dissertation it's deeply philosophical and historically significant. She meticulously examined how attitudes towards race and slavery in France and San Domingo, which later became Haiti, shaped the conceptualizations of rights and freedom during the French and Haitian revolutions.
So she's looking at how ideas about race and slavery influence how people thought about freedom and rights.
Exactly. And what's particularly compelling is her focus on the Haitian Revolution. It's often overshadowed by the American and French Revolution.
Yeah, it doesn't always get the same attention.
Right. But Cooper, she brings it to the forefront, emphasizing its crucial importance in shaping modern understandings of liberty and equality.
And she's doing this at a time when the U.S. is occupying Haiti. That adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Her scholarship, it's directly engaging with these power dynamics and historical silences, offering a critical perspective on the dominant narratives. The entry even compares her work to C.L.R. James's The Black Jacobins.
Which is a classic work on the Haitian Revolution. So she's in good company.
She is. And Cooper, she delves into the economic interests that fueled slavery, the role of abolitionist groups like the Friends of the Blacks, the complexities of colonial representation, and how all these factors shaped both revolutions and the struggle for racial equality. It's really a powerful piece of historical and political philosophy.
It makes you think about the foundations of modern democratic thought and how those foundations are often built on shaky ground.
Exactly. So now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how Cooper's philosophy has been received both during her life and today.
Okay, so how did people respond to her ideas back then?
Well, the Stanford entry points out that Cooper was very active and intellectual in political debates. She engaged with a lot of prominent figures of her time.
Now, give me some names.
Oh, well, black male leaders like Douglas Delaney Dubois in Washington and influential activist women like Sojourner Truth and Ida B. Wells Barnett. They exchanged ideas through their writing public speeches and at big events like the Hampton Conference and the Pan-African Conference.
Wow, so she was right there in the thick of things.
She was. But here's the thing, and this is really important. The early canons of African American philosophy, they often overlooked Cooper and other black women scholars.
They focus more on the men.
Yeah, they tended to privilege male voices. The entry even mentions some specific scholarly publications from the 1990s that demonstrate this pattern of exclusion.
It's frustrating, but unfortunately not surprising. It's a pattern we see repeated throughout history. But were there any exceptions?
Yes. The entry highlights Joy James's work, Transcending the Talented Tenth, as a notable exception. James, she specifically recognized and emphasized Cooper's argument for a bottom-up approach to liberation, one that centered the experiences of working class and poor black women.
That's so important, centering the voices of those who are often the most marginalized.
Exactly. And thankfully, the entry makes it clear that in the 21st century, there's been a real resurgence of interest in Cooper's work.
So she's finally getting the recognition she deserves.
Yes. Her writings are being included in philosophy anthologies, and there have been special journal issues dedicated to her work, like in Hypatia and Philosophia Africana.
That's great to hear. It sounds like scholars are finally starting to appreciate the breadth and depth of her contributions.
They are, and philosophers like Lewis Gordon have been really instrumental in this. He highlights her work in existentialism, black feminist philosophy, and theories of worth.
Lewis Gordon.
Yeah.
He's a big name in contemporary philosophy. So for him to champion Cooper's work, that's really significant.
It is. Gordon actually places Cooper's voice alongside works by Du Bois, Ellison Fannin, and Morrison, arguing that Cooper was the most sophisticated thinker on black feminist thought of her era.
Wow, that's high praise.
It is. And Gordon's analysis of her efficiency theory of worth it's really insightful. He connects her essay, What Are We Worth? To the ideas of Marx and Nietzsche.
Wow, so she's in dialogue with some of the giants of Western philosophy.
She is, and we can't forget Vivian M. May's Anna Julia Cooper, visionary black feminist, a critical introduction.
Yeah, May's work is really important for understanding Cooper.
It is. She corrects a lot of earlier misinterpretations of Cooper's thought, especially those that accused her of elitism or relying on problematic eugenic language.
That's crucial because it's so easy for ideas to be taken out of context or misinterpreted, especially when it comes to thinkers who have been marginalized.
Absolutely. She really emphasizes Cooper's lifelong activism and provides really compelling counter arguments to those critiques.
So she's painting a much more nuanced and accurate picture of Cooper and her work.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's dive into some of the key philosophical ideas that emerge from A Voice from the South. It's such a rich and complex work.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so right from the start in our raison d'etre, Cooper uses this really striking analogy of a courtroom trial.
Okay, a courtroom trial. Interesting. Tell me more.
She says that the voice of the black woman has been conspicuously absent from this trial.
Like she hasn't even been allowed to testify.
Exactly. And she's using this analogy to frame the whole discussion of race and gender in society.
Yeah.
She's arguing that the conversation is inherently flawed because it's missing this crucial perspective.
So it's not just that black women haven't been heard. It's that their absence actively distorts the whole conversation.
Exactly. And then in womanhood, a vital element in the regeneration and progress of a race, she really digs into this idea of intersectionality.
Okay, this is where she really starts to lay out those ideas.
Yes, and she directly challenges both the internal dynamics of the black community, particularly black male patriarchy, and the broader societal norms of the time.
So she's critiquing both the racism of the wider society and the sexism within the black community.
Yeah. Exactly, and she has this famous line that I think really captures the essence of her argument.
What's the line?
She says, "Only the black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage. Then and there, the whole Negro race enters with me."
Wow, that's powerful. She's basically saying that the liberation of black women is essential for the liberation of the entire black race.
Exactly. And she's using this powerful statement to challenge figures like Martin Delany, who claimed that his own individual achievements represented the progress of the whole black race.
Because he was a black man, he thought that was enough.
Right. But Cooper, she points out the limitations of that kind of singular representation.
She's saying that no single person can speak for an entire race,
Hmm.
especially not without considering the unique experiences of black women.
Precisely. And she also addresses the specific vulnerabilities that black women faced at the time, that the dangers of sexual exploitation, the lack of protection.
And she critiques some of Alexander Crummel's distinctions between colored people and the Negro population.
Yes, she challenges his reliance on the idea of white kinship as a source of affluence and status for some black people. She highlights the very real dangers and systemic vulnerabilities that black women faced.
It's like she's pushing back against this idea that some black people were somehow better off or more respectable than others.
Exactly. And while she does emphasize the importance of honor and the moral standing of black women and their roles as mothers, the entry points out that this emphasis has sometimes been interpreted as her upholding certain Victorian ideals.
Oh, so she's being critiqued for maybe reinforcing some of the gender norms of the time.
Yeah, but there are other interpretations that see this as a more strategic move on her part.
Like she's using the language of the time to make her arguments more persuasive.
Exactly. It's complex, and there's definitely room for debate and interpretation. And it's important to remember that while Cooper, she did see America as a potential model for progress, she was also very aware of the contradictions, the hypocrisy.
She wasn't blind to the realities of racial inequality.
Absolutely not. She constantly held America up to its own ideals, while exposing the gap between those ideals and the lived experiences of black people.
Okay, so let's talk about her essay, The Higher Education of Women.
Oh yes. This is a classic. She makes a really strong feminist argument for the importance of women's education, highlighting all the positive impacts it can have.
And she's not just talking about education in general. She's specifically focused on the education of black women.
Exactly. And she addresses the resistance to this idea that existed even within the black community.
There were people who didn't think black women should get higher education.
Yeah, it's sad but true. She even talks about this paradoxical situation where black men who were advocating for racial uplift would sometimes be opposed to higher education for black women.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's like they saw the potential of education for themselves, but not for the women in their lives.
It's a complex issue for sure, but Cooper, she saw the incredible potential that educated black women could have.
She famously said, "Give the girls a chance."
She did. And
Right.
that call, it still resonates today.
It does. So what about her essay, Woman versus the Indian?
Ah, yes. This one is all about her philosophy of rights, which is really intersectional and inclusive.
So she's thinking about the rights of all oppressed groups, not just women.
Exactly. And she's very critical of the racism that was present within the white women's suffrage movement.
There was racism within the movement for women's rights.
Sadly, yes. And
Yeah.
and Cooper, she calls them out on it. She rejects any kind of exclusionary thinking when it comes to justice.
She's saying that you can't fight for the rights of one group while ignoring the oppression of another.
Exactly. And her statement, woman's cause is the pause of the weak, it really sums up her expansive vision of social justice.
It's a beautiful and powerful statement.
Mm.
And it speaks to her deep commitment to fighting for the rights of all those who are marginalized.
Absolutely. Okay, so then in her essay, The Status of Women in America, she goes back to focusing on the unique position of black women.
So she's back to talking about the intersection of racism and sexism.
Exactly. And she highlights the dedication, the resilience, and the political agency of black women, even those who weren't formally educated.
And this is after her essay on womanhood, where she focused more on the domestic roles of women.
Yes. And in Status of Woman, we see her perspective broaden.
She's recognizing a wider range of black female agency.
Exactly. She talks about their contributions to social, economic, and national issues that go far beyond the domestic sphere.
So she's expanding her view of what it means to be a black woman and an agent of change.
Exactly. Okay, so then we have her essay, Has America a Race Problem? If so, how can it best be solved? And in this one, she argues for achieving peace through a genuine embrace of difference.
Embracing difference. That's a powerful idea, especially in time when people were so focused on assimilation and conformity.
It is. And she uses this concept of the equilibrium of opposing forces.
Equilibrium of opposing forces. What do you mean by that?
She believes that each race has a unique contribution to make to humanity, and that these differences, they're not meant to be a source of division.
They're meant to work together.
Yes,
Yeah.
like different parts of a whole.
Mhm.
She even suggests that there's a kind of divine purpose at work in these historical conflicts.
So she's seen a larger, meaning a kind of a teleology to history.
You could say that she believes that these conflicts are ultimately driving humanity towards progress.
It's an optimistic view of history, that's for sure.
It is. Okay, then in The Negro, as presented in American literature, she critiques the dominant representations of Black people in American literature.
She's talking about the stereotypes and the distortions.
Exactly. And she introduces this concept of an inauthentic standpoint.
An authentic standpoint.
Yes. It's basically the idea that when someone speaks from a position of power and privilege, they often misrepresent the experiences of those who are marginalized.
So like a white author writing about the Black experience without truly understanding it.
Exactly. And Cooper, she argues that these inauthentic portrayals, they actually reveal more about the biases of the author than about the reality of Black life.
It's like she's turning the gaze back on the observer.
She is, and she calls for authentic portrayals by Black artists themselves.
Which is something that we see happening more and more in the 20th century.
Absolutely. Okay, so next up is her essay, What Are We Worth? And this is where she really tackles the issue of Black worth head on.
She's confronting the racist ideas of Black inferiority.
Yes. She starts by directly addressing Henry Ward Beecher's condescending question about the supposed value of Africa and its people.
So she's not shying away from the tough questions.
Not at all. And she critiques the use of mere sentimentality and the association of ideas as the basis for racial prejudice.
She's saying that prejudice is based on feelings and associations rather than on reason and logic.
Exactly. And that makes it really difficult to argue against.
Because you can't reason someone out of a feeling.
Right. So she shifts towards a more materialist and existential understanding of worth.
So she's grounding human value in something more concrete.
Exactly. She emphasizes the importance of education, of self-development, and the tangible contributions that Black people have made despite facing oppression.
She's looking at the evidence, the real world accomplishments.
Yes. And she provides all these statistics about the growth of Black schools, the increasing number of Black professionals.
She's building a case based on facts, not on feelings.
Exactly. And she advocates for both a classical liberal arts education and practical trade skills for Black people.
So she's not limiting people to one path.
Yeah.
She's recognizing the diversity of talents and aspirations.
Yes. And she directly challenges Beecher's claims by highlighting the achievements of Black people throughout history in poetry and invention and art, in heroism.
Yeah, she's saying, look at what we've accomplished despite all the obstacles we've faced.
Exactly. And she ultimately argues that intrinsic human worth will eventually be recognized despite prejudice.
It's a message of hope and a call to recognize the inherent value of all people.
It is. Okay, so finally we have her essay, The Game from a Belief.
Okay, tell me about this one.
So in this essay, she engages with the ideas of 19th century progressivism and positivism.
Progressivism and positivism, those are pretty big intellectual currents at the time.
They were, and she uses their language to explore the debates about racial uplift and universal brotherhood.
Okay, so how does she do that?
Well, she creates this philosophical construct of an antagonist who represents skeptical unbelief in human progress.
Like a cynic.
Yeah, someone who doesn't believe in the possibility of real change.
And she contrasts that with believing humanity.
Exactly. And her definition of faith it's really interesting.
How does she define faith?
She says that faith is treating the truth as true.
Treating the truth as true. That's a good one. I like that.
Right. And she's specifically applying this idea to the context of racial uplift. She's calling for consistency between beliefs and actions.
So she's saying don't just talk about equality, actually do something about it.
Exactly. She's challenging people to live up to their their stated ideals.
And to dismantle the barriers of racial prejudice.
Yes, it's a powerful call to ethical action and social responsibility.
Okay, so that's a Voice from the South.
Mhm.
Are there any other essays that you want to touch on?
Yes. The Stanford entry also mentions a couple of others that I think are worth highlighting.
Okay, let's hear them.
So first, there's the ethics of the Negro question. And this one it's a really scathing critique of the hypocrisy of Christianity in America.
She's calling out the church for not living up to its own teachings.
Exactly. She points out the contradiction between the Christian ideals of love, compassion, and equality, and the reality of slavery and racial oppression.
It's a theme we see throughout history, the gap between religious ideals and actual practice.
Sadly, yes. And Cooper, she doesn't hold back in her critique.
She's speaking truth to power.
She is. And then there's My Racial Philosophy, which is her response to a survey by Charles S. Johnson.
Okay, and what does she say in that essay?
Well, she emphasizes, again, the overlapping nature of race and gender prejudice, how they impact Black women in unique ways.
She's reiterating her intersectional analysis.
Exactly. And she makes this really interesting argument that prejudice reflects imperfections within civilization itself.
So prejudice is a sign of a flawed society.
Yes. And she's saying that we all have a responsibility to address these imperfections.
So it's not just about blaming individuals. It's about working together to create a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. Okay, so finally, let's talk a little bit about Cooper's life itself, because I think understanding her biography really helps to understand her work.
Absolutely. Context is always important.
So she was born into slavery.
Wow. So she experienced firsthand the horrors of that system.
She did, and her mother was incredibly resilient. She played a huge role in Cooper's life.